welcome to my channel. My name is Deandra. If you're new here, if you're not, welcome back. Today I'll be giving you some tips and tricks on how to easily find an apartment in New York. I've been in New York since 2016, and in the 4 years I've been here, I've moved to 4 different places. And these are just some things that I wish that I knew beforehand on how to make it a lot easier and what to look out for, because I have been in New York since I was 18, so I've learned everything about moving from my experience here alone. Now, first things first, I'm gonna let you guys know where I find the actual apartments. So there are plenty of websites, but the ones that me and my friends usually use and what works best for us are gonna be Easy, Zillow, and Nooklin. Nooklin is if you want a place in Brooklyn. Bushwick is where I just moved from, and Brooklyn in general is doing a lot of developing and always has new apartments that are like just renovated. If you're looking for something on the cheaper side, I would definitely recommend looking in Bushwick. And if you know specifically you're not coming up here to move in like by yourself or with a friend or anything, I really recommend Facebook groups. If you're looking for a roommate or someplace to stay, there's this Facebook group called Gypsy Housing that a lot of my friends have used, and they've never had any problems with it, and they could find a roommate easily. Now with this, still make sure you're checking on who you're moving into, because it is a Facebook group at the end of the day, but it does really help. Next, before you even start looking, you need to know your budget. You don't know what you will not and cannot go over, and you need to stick to it as best as you can, especially when you're first moving in, because if it's your first big move, you have to account for all the money that you're going to be spending on furniture. If you already have furniture, you still need to save up, because moving in general is really expensive. The cheapest moving van that I've ever come across is around $200. So you need to think of that wherever you're moving. Then you need to take whatever your rent is and then multiply that by 3. So for example, my rent at my last apartment that I just moved from was $775. Now, I can't just bring $775 up and be like, oh, I want to move, because you also have to account for, you have to pay security deposit, which is gonna usually be another month of rent. They have you pay first month ahead, so that's already 2 months of rent. And then there's also a charge for whatever company helps you find the apartment. So whoever tours it to you, whoever shows it to you, their company for helping you and like signing you and being the middleman, there's a fee for that as well, which will usually be another month of rent. So you should have at least 3 months of rent saved, sometimes even more. If your credit is not where this apartment wants it to be at, you could also be charged more for that, just so they'll know that you'll be able to make rent. So you also need to account for that. So with that being said, save, save, save. And it can also never hurt to have a guarantor. So if you have your parents or anyone that makes more money than you, you know, I came out here as a college student with no money. So luckily my parents, they were able to guarantor me. So what that is basically a person saying, if you cannot pay your rent, then you have someone who can pay your rent for you. And the guarantor, they do an extensive background check on them. They have to be a reliable source. And something that's really annoying, but is true, the guarantor has to make at least 80 times what the rent is. So if the rent is $775, my guarantor has to make 80 times that amount, you know? So it is a lot of money, but if you have someone that would do that for you, great. It will also increase your chances of getting the apartment. Everyone knows New York is notorious for being one of the most expensive places to live. Don't get too discouraged. I've had friends that have lived in New York for $400 or $500. You can get those prices, but they'll be even further away from the city. Usually there's a lot of places near Coney Island, but keep in mind, Coney Island is an hour and a half, 2 hours from the city, depending on what part. Another way to actually save money is trying to move on non-peak seasons for moving. Usually peak seasons are gonna be around April, May, you know, when people just graduated college, that's around April, May, or when people are about to start another semester. So those few months are peak time, as well as same thing for fall. Just think of when you would go to school or when you would start school. Those are going to be peak times for moving in New York. Next, a really important tip is to know the location. You have to think about where do you want to move, because Bushwick is a way different vibe. I live in East Village now. Those are completely two different vibes, you know, so it really depends on what you're doing. If you're someone who needs to wake up early, then I wouldn't suggest living in the East Village where I live. It's in the middle of everything and I always hear what's going on. And on the same note, if you're a party person, you love having people over, you're not gonna wanna move to a quiet neighborhood on the Upper East Side, you know? So you just have to really think about what your activities are, what type of lifestyle you're living, in the best environment to accommodate that. Another thing, locations can change completely at night. You never notice in the daytime how many stoplights are gonna be on your street. So you wanna make sure, if you're really interested in this place, you need to look by the location, how it is in the daytime, and also how it is at nighttime. Does the air get a lot scarier, or is it about the same? Because you want to be comfortable walking home anytime. Another thing that you need to think about when choosing the location for where you want to move is what is close by where you live. And by that I mean a lot of New York apartments, they don't come with washers and dryers. That's why there's so many laundromats around. But if you don't have a washer and dryer in the apartment, you need to make sure a laundromat is at least across the street, because you have to think about carrying all that heavy clothes. Like, you're not gonna wanna go more than a block. So you need to check to make sure that that's close, as well as a grocery store. Where I used to live, there was a grocery store a 15-minute walk away. And that's, again, almost impossible to carry groceries that far if you're just carrying it. So you want to make sure that grocery stores are walking distance. If a gym is important to you, you could have that in walking distance. It's all about really looking and what you actually need. But grocery store and laundromat are definitely the two most important. You also need to know the crime rate in whatever neighborhoods you're going to be living in, because most people, they wouldn't want it to be a high crime rate, but you would never know unless you looked it up. Like my last place, I didn't even ask the question, and it turns out the apartment that I was moving into, it had actually just been robbed like a week before, you know, and that would have been good information to know. So it never hurts to ask. They could always say they don't know, but I would still look it up yourself just to be safe and sure. Another great tip is really think about, what are you going to use your space for? Are you a type of person that likes to go out all the time and just comes home to sleep? If it is, then you could opt for a smaller kitchen, smaller common area, and just a room, and pay more attention on a bigger room. But if you're like me and you like hosting, you like having your friends over and things like that, then you'll opt for a bigger living room and common area space. And that could also affect the price as well, because if you don't need that much, why are you spending all this money on a huge apartment if you're not even gonna use it? I'm a homebody, so I also just love staying at home. So I knew the inside had to make me feel comfy and nice, because I'm here all the time, you know? You can also really think about what you can do with the space. Like currently where I live, there are a bunch of white walls, which is kind of boring. Now I live in an apartment, but I can do peel and stick wallpaper, something that won't damage the walls at all. So you can just think about fun things that you can do to the space to spruce it up and make it your own, because I definitely looked at the place that I'm living in with potential, knowing that, oh, I can upgrade it here and it will be a fun little project and it will make me love the space even more. Another tip is, if a deal sounds too good, it probably is. And I mean that in the sense that, oh, it has this one amazing feature, but what is that feature trying to hide? You need to check the ceilings to see if there's any water damage. You'll know because it's a line that goes straight through the roof and it looks like it's dipping down, because if you see that, it's gonna eventually be a problem. So you need to check on things like that. You need to make sure all the outlets are covered. There's no glaring damage. Just because you see a part of the apartment that you love, just make sure not to get blinded by that and to actually check around to see, because this apartment that I moved into, like I said, now living in here for a month, I see water damage. I see little drafts in the window that I know is going to be so cold during winter, you know, and I see little things like that I wish that I would have looked at harder. And if you're like me and you've moved in and then you start seeing these things, videotape it. You do not want any landlords to charge you or even possibly not give you back your security deposit just because of something that was already there. Another thing when you move, when you're still apartment hunting, you need to know who is your superintendent, how close are they to where you live, if you have any emergencies in the middle of the night, is there a separate number to call, or what are their hours? You need to figure that out. You don't want to have a leak in your apartment at like 3 a.m. and then have no one to call, and then no one could come like to the weekend or something like that. So it's really important that you have a good super and that they're on it and that they're easily accessible. Another important thing is to know what comes with your apartment. Many apartments come with heat and water, but some don't. Different apartments come with different amenities. It's also important to know because using gas as electricity is a big thing in New York. My apartment is electric, so if it is electric, you need to tell Con Edison, who is the main energy source in New York. You can tell them that you have electric and actually your bills will be lower. Another thing, you need to know what's allowed. You brought your pet dog to live with you. You need to make sure that this place allows pets and try not to have a pet fee. Some places they do allow pets, but they'll have a fee, and some just allow pets. So you just need to make sure. You also need to know if you can sublet your apartment. And what that is if anything comes up or you change your mind or you want to go, you can have someone come in and live where you lived and they pay the rent. So they take on your lease, or they give you the money and you still pay the rent, but they're living there. Some apartments, they're fine with this, some aren't. So it's another thing to ask. And one of the most important tips that I can give you is knowing your lease length. Never sign a lease more than 1 year. I did that once and I will never do that again. I got screwed so hard because usually apartments do that when they know that something's wrong or they're gonna have trouble getting someone to come in the next year. So to make more money, they get you held down for 2 years and you can't get out of your contract. And it's usually a horrible situation. You want to have the option. If you live your first year in New York and you're like, this isn't even for me, then you have to stay for a year if they don't allow subletting, you know? So it's a really smart decision to only do a 1-year lease, because even if you love the place, then you can just renew the lease, you know, rather than being forced to have to stay for multiple years, which is ridiculous. So number one rule, whatever you do, never in your life, never sign a 2-year apartment lease, because there's always going to be a better deal. Please do not sign a 2-year lease, please. And my final tip for today is going to be really finding a place that you love. Even if it's a little bit out of your budget. I know I was just talking about budget. I'm not talking about crazy out of your budget. I'm talking like, if it's like, I would say $100. I would not go $100 over budget. If you find a place that you love and are crazy about, go for it, because it's literally where you live. I still wake up every morning in my apartment now and I'm like, I love it here. I cannot even believe that I live here. It's amazing. And I can't even think of any other words other than love. Like, I love where I live now, and that's how you should be talking about your apartment. These are all my tips and tricks on how to find an apartment easily in New York. Please let me know if this helped you guys. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.